My name is Selena Lawson. I'm 30 years old. And last Tuesday, I sat alone in my office in Portland, listening to 43 voicemails from the people who raised me, people I hadn't spoken to in 7 years. Not one of them said, "I'm sorry." Every single one said the same 2 words instead. 7 years ago, I walked out of my mother's house with $200, 1 suitcase, and the clothes on my back. My family told the whole town I was unstable. They said they were sick with worry. They weren't worried. They were relieved. And they would have stayed relieved forever if my own sister hadn't typed my name into a search bar last week. Before I tell you what happened in that voicemail box, I need you to understand what it was like being me in that house. Not the highlight reel. The real thing. I was the middle child in a family that only had room for one favorite at a time, and it was never me. My brother Carlos was the golden boy until he wasn't good enough at football anymore, and then my mother simply transferred the crown to Marianne the moment she made cheerleading captain. I don't remember a single year where the crown landed on my head. I remember being useful instead. I was the one who watched Marianne after school, so my mother could work extra shifts. I was the one who did Carlos's homework when he was too tired. I was the one who learned, very early, that love in that house was a transaction, and I was always the one paying. My grandmother Ruth used to say I had an old soul. She said it like it was a compliment, and for a long time it was the only compliment I trusted because it was the only one that didn't come with a price tag attached. Ruth lived 2 streets over in a little house with a porch swing and a garden that smelled like tomatoes in July. When things got loud at home, I would walk to her porch and sit with her, and she would braid my hair and tell me stories about her own mother, who had left an even worse house than mine, decades before it was something women were allowed to talk about out loud. "You have my blood in you," she told me once, when I was maybe 15, crying on her porch steps after my mother had screamed at me for forgetting to pick Marianne up on time. The leaving kind of blood. Don't be ashamed of it when it's your turn. I didn't understand what she meant back then. I understand it perfectly now. Grandma Ruth passed when I was 23. I remember standing at her graveside in a black dress that was too big for me because I'd bought it 2 sizes up on sale, and looking at my mother's face and seeing nothing there. Not grief. Performance. She cried loudly enough for the whole cemetery to hear, and the second the last person left, she turned to my father and asked him what time the diner opened, because she wanted lunch. I was the only one who noticed Ruth's absence didn't change anything about how that house operated. If anything, it got worse, because the one person who had ever protected me was gone, and my mother knew it. Let me take you back to the night everything finally broke. Thanksgiving, 2019. Richwood, Ohio. A town of 4,000 people, the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do, where the gas station attendant knows your GPA, and the church ladies know your dress size, and nobody, not one single person, ever thought to ask if I was okay. 15 relatives packed shoulder to shoulder around my mother's dining table. My sister Marianne had just been promoted to marketing coordinator at a company in Columbus, and my mother raised her glass the way she always did, to Marianne, our star, our shining girl, the one who was finally going to make something of the Lawson name. Nobody asked what I was doing with my life. Nobody asked because nobody had ever asked. I was wallpaper in my own family's house, and I had been wallpaper for so long that I'd almost stopped noticing the walls. Almost. I waited until dessert. I don't know why I picked that moment. Maybe it was the pumpkin pie, or maybe it was watching my mother's face glow while she talked about Marianne's new apartment, an apartment I later learned had been furnished, in part, with money that used to have my name on it. Something in me just decided that this year, I wasn't going to disappear quietly into the kitchen the way I always did. "Mom," I said, "I wanted to ask you about Grandma Ruth's education fund." The table went silent. Not the comfortable kind of silent. The kind that tells you a grenade just rolled under your chair, and everyone at the table saw it land except you. My mother set her coffee cup down slowly, deliberately, the china clinking against the saucer like a warning bell. She looked at me, and when she finally spoke, her voice was sweet enough to rot your teeth from across the room. "This is what I've been dealing with," she said, not to me, to the table. Like I was an exhibit. "She's been acting erratic for months." 15 pairs of eyes landed on me, like I'd just cursed in church. My father stared at his plate. My Aunt Patricia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I felt my whole body go hot, and then cold, the particular humiliation of being discussed in the third person while sitting 3 feet away. I excused myself and went to the kitchen to wash dishes, because that's what I always did while everyone else celebrated. I cleaned up after them. I existed in the margins of their joy. The faucet was running, hot water fogging up the window over the sink, and I still heard my mother in the next room, her voice pitched low but not low enough, talking to my Aunt Patricia. Ruth's fund had gone toward Marianne's sorority dues, her car, a security deposit. Selena doesn't need it, my mother said, like it was self-evident, like it was a fact of nature. I turned the water off. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. Grandma Ruth had left $12,000 for each of us grandchildren, in separate accounts, with our names on them. She'd told me herself, in her kitchen, taking my hands in hers, her skin thin and papery and warm. This is for your future, my love. Nobody can touch it but you. I had believed her completely. I had believed it the way you believe the ground under your feet, without ever thinking to check. Somebody had touched it. I walked back into the dining room, and I don't remember deciding to speak. The words were just already out of my mouth. That money was mine. Grandma left it for me. You had no right. My mother folded her hands and bowed her head the exact way she always did right before she rewrote reality in front of an audience. It was a performance I had watched my whole life and never once been able to stop. You're being dramatic, she said. You sound just like your grandmother. Always stirring things up. That stopped me cold, colder than the money ever could have. My grandmother Ruth was the kindest, steadiest person I had ever known, and my mother pronounced her name like it was something to scrape off the bottom of her shoe. 10 minutes later, my mother stood up and gathered everyone into the living room, her voice trembling in a way I now understand was rehearsed. I've tried to keep this private, she said, dabbing at a dry eye with a napkin. But I think everyone needs to know. Selena hasn't been well. She's had episodes. My father stared at the carpet like it owed him money. My uncle Carlos nodded, not at me, at her, agreeing with a story he had no evidence for and no interest in questioning. Marianne looked at her phone, scrolling, bored, like this was a rerun she'd already seen. 15 relatives in that room. Not one of them turned to me and asked, Selena, is that true? Are you okay? Not one. I went upstairs. I moved like I was underwater. Slow and strange, my body doing something my mind hadn't fully agreed to yet. I packed a suitcase. I took the $200 I'd saved in server tips from my part-time job at the diner, a winter coat, and the small wooden box Grandma Ruth had left me, the one I'd kept on my dresser for 2 years without opening, because opening it meant admitting she was really, truly gone, and I hadn't been ready for that kind of gone. I walked back downstairs and crossed the living room. 15 faces watched me go, and none of them moved to stop me. My mother's voice followed me all the way to the door. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly because somewhere inside me, underneath the shaking and the fear, I already knew I would never open it again. Outside, snow was falling on Richwood, soft and silent. The kind of snow that makes a small town look like a postcard of a happiness it doesn't actually contain. I had one suitcase, $200, and nowhere to go. I stood on that porch for a full minute, waiting for someone, anyone, to open that door behind me. Nobody did. That was the last time I heard my mother's voice for 7 years. I bought a bus ticket to the farthest place my $200 could take me. Portland, Oregon. 38 hours with my suitcase wedged between my knees and my grandmother's box on my lap, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. I didn't sleep. I just watched America roll past the window, flat Ohio fields turning into Indiana, turning into somewhere I'd never see the name of, and I tried to remember the last time anyone in my family had asked me a question that wasn't a complaint wearing a question mark. Do you ever think about anyone but yourself? Why can't you just be normal? What is wrong with you? I couldn't remember a single real one. Not one. Portland in December is gray and wet and unfamiliar in a way that should have terrified me more than it did. My first night, I slept in a women's shelter with 14 other women, none of whom asked me why I was there, because they all already knew the answer lived in 100 different versions of the same story. No credit history. No references. No local connections. Just a work ethic my family had spent 23 years extracting from me and 0 years ever once appreciating. I found a job in 2 weeks. Receptionist at a small firm called Hale Associates, 8 employees, a cramped office above a dry cleaner that always smelled faintly of steam and chemical lavender. I answered phones. I sorted mail. I refilled the coffee machine and learned everyone's order without being asked. It wasn't glamorous. It was a paycheck, and after a lifetime of being told what I was worth by people who benefited from underpricing me, a paycheck felt like a revolution. 3 weeks after I arrived in Portland, I opened social media for the first, and as it turned out, the last time. My mother had posted a photo of the whole family at a church potluck, everyone smiling, and underneath it, "Please keep Selena in your prayers. We just hope she's safe wherever she is. We love her, and our door is always open." My Uncle Carlos had commented underneath, "Casual, cruel in the way only family can be cruel. Always the dramatic one of the group." 47 likes. 47 people who had decided, without a single fact, that the story my mother told was the truth. That night I deleted my account and never looked back. I want to be honest with you about what that decision cost me, because I think people who haven't lived it imagine estrangement as some clean, freeing thing, and it isn't. Not at first. Not for a long time. Going no contact meant no savings to fall back on if I got sick. No health insurance for the first year. No emergency contact to write down on a single form ever at any doctor's office or job application. So I always just wrote Jessica, a woman I'd known for 6 weeks, because at least she'd pick up the phone. It meant the constant, low hum underneath every good day of knowing that somewhere 15 people were telling a story about me, and I could not correct a single word of it. It meant birthdays that came and went in total silence, and Christmas mornings spent alone in a studio apartment with a space heater and a rerun of some movie I wasn't really watching. But here's what the silence also gave me, and I need you to hear this part clearly, because it's the whole reason I'm telling you this story at all. The first morning I woke up in Portland for real, not running anymore, not hiding, just awake in my own single bed in my own tiny room, I noticed something was missing. It took me a full minute lying there in the dark to identify what it was. It was the voice. The narration that had run underneath my entire life, like a second heartbeat. "You're not enough. You're too much. You're the problem." That voice had gone quiet, as if someone had finally found the switch on a radio station I'd been forced to listen to since I was a child, a station that had never once played anything but static shaped like insults. I lay there in the silence and I cried, but it wasn't the crying I was used to. It was relief shaped like grief. At Hale Associates, my boss Margaret Hale noticed me before I noticed myself. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who had built her firm from nothing and had no patience for people who wasted potential, including her own employees. In my first week, without anyone asking me to, I had reorganized the entire client filing system. 3 years of scattered, mislabeled folders, suddenly sorted and color-coded and cross-referenced. I hadn't done it to impress anyone. I genuinely could not stand the chaos of it. The way disorder anywhere made my chest feel tight, like a held breath I couldn't release. Margaret walked past my desk on a Friday afternoon, stopped and came back. "You reorganized 3 years of files in 4 days," she said, arms crossed, studying me like a puzzle. "Who does that?" "Someone who needed something she could control," I said, before I could stop myself. She didn't laugh. She didn't offer me pity either, which I would have hated more than anything. She just pulled up a chair, sat down across from my desk, and said, "Tell me what else you see that's broken around here." I told her. Everything. The invoicing system that double-billed clients, by accident twice a month. The scheduling software nobody had updated since 2015. The way 2 departments were duplicating the same work without knowing it. She listened to all of it without interrupting once, and at the end she said, "Come to my office Monday. I want to talk about your future here." Within 6 months, I went from receptionist to project coordinator. I enrolled in an online business administration program, Night classes stacked on top of a full workday, no cinematic montage, just alarm clock set for 5 a.m. and spreadsheets glowing on my laptop until midnight. I didn't have a plan to succeed, not really. I had a plan to never again feel the particular powerlessness of standing in a room while 15 people decided who I was without asking me. Success, when it came, was just a side effect of that fear finally being put to good use. I made mistakes. Of course I did. There was a year, my second in Portland, where I dated a man named Trevor, who reminded me so much of my father, quiet, conflict avoidant, disappearing into himself the moment things got hard, that my therapist gently pointed out I was recreating the exact dynamic I'd fled 2,000 miles to escape. I ended that relationship the week she said it out loud, because I had promised myself, standing on that snowy porch in Richwood, that I would never again build a life around people who chose comfort over me. When I caught a billing error that would have cost the firm $6,000, a client had been charged for a project that had actually been canceled 3 months earlier, and nobody had caught it. Margaret promoted me to junior consultant. I finished my degree at the end of the 3rd year with no ceremony, no cap and gown, no family in folding chairs cheering my name. I printed the diploma at a copy shop 2 blocks from my apartment, framed it for $10, and hung it above my desk at home, right where I'd see it every morning before work. Margaret saw a photo of it when she stopped by for a project review one evening. "Congratulations," she said, studying it. "How does Director of Projects sound?" Hale Associates had grown to 35 employees and 2 offices by then. We'd been featured in 2 regional business magazines for our expansion into nonprofit consulting. I wasn't rich. I drove a used Honda with a check engine light I mostly ignored. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with mismatched furniture I'd collected from estate sales. But I had a retirement account. I had savings, real savings, the kind that meant a flat tire wasn't a catastrophe anymore. I had health insurance with my name on the card. By Richwood standards, I was doing fine. By my own standards, the standards of the girl who had slept in a shelter with 14 strangers 7 years earlier, I was breathing air I never once believed I would reach. The magazine feature that changed everything ran in October. A profile on women in leadership across the Pacific Northwest. My photo, my name, my title, a condensed version of my story that didn't mention my family at all, because by then I genuinely didn't think about them enough to bring them up in an interview. I wasn't searching for them online. I had let them go completely, the way you let go of a rope burning through your hands. When you grow up as the person everyone blames, you learn that distance isn't cruelty. It's oxygen. And I had spent 23 years of my life holding my breath, without even realizing it. 7 years of nothing. Not one call. Not one letter. Not one birthday text. Not even a wrong number kind of silence, just a clean, total absence, as if I had never existed in that house at all. Until a Tuesday in March, when my sister, for the first time in her entire life, typed my name into a search engine. And I want you to understand, she wasn't looking for me. She was looking for money. Marianne was 32 by then, freshly divorced from a man named Bryce who had left her with a mortgage she couldn't cover alone, and drowning in a way that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with math. Her payments were 3 months behind. The bank had already sent 2 warning letters. She thought of me, Patricia told me later, the same way you think about a tool you tossed into a drawer years ago and forgot, not with affection, but with sudden, practical interest, the moment you finally need it again. She typed Selena Lawson. The first result, Director of Operations, Hale Associates, Portland, Oregon. The second, the business magazine feature, Emerging Leaders in Community Development. Patricia told me Marianne stared at the screen for a full minute without blinking, scrolling up and down through the article like she was checking it wasn't a different Selena Lawson entirely. Then she called our mother. "Mom, you have to see this. Selena is a director at a real company." The sound on the other end of the line, Patricia said, wasn't joy. It wasn't pride. It was a sharp intake of breath, the kind a person makes when the story they've been telling for 7 years catches fire in their own hands, right in front of them, and there's no water close enough to save it. "That's impossible," my mother said, and she couldn't finish the sentence, because finishing it would have meant admitting the lie had been hers from the very beginning. that the daughter she'd told the whole town was unstable had actually just been the only one strong enough to leave. The call started that same afternoon. I was in a glass-walled conference room closing out a quarterly review with two of our biggest nonprofit clients, walking them through numbers I was genuinely proud of. My phone buzzed against the table, face down, and I ignored it the way I ignore most calls from unknown numbers. Then it buzzed again. And again. By the time the meeting ended and I flipped my phone over, the screen was a wall of missed call notifications, every single one from an Ohio area code I hadn't seen in 7 years and would have recognized anywhere. I went back to my office, closed the door, sat down, and pressed play on the first one, my hand steadier than I expected it to be. Voicemail 1. Marianne, breezy, clearly rehearsed in the mirror beforehand. Selena, it's Marianne. I know it's been a while. Hey, I need to talk to you about something important. Call me back, okay? Voicemail 7. My father, hesitant, his voice older than I remembered it. Hi, sweetheart. It's Dad. The family's going through a hard time. We could really use your help. Voicemail 15. My mother, sharp, imperious, exactly the same voice that had chased me out into the snow. Selena, it's your mother. Family is family. We need to talk. Voicemail 22. Carlos, gruff, awkward, clearly forced into calling by someone else.
Hey.
It's your brother. Look, just call somebody back, all right? This is getting ridiculous. Voicemail 38. Marianne again. And this time the breeziness had completely dissolved, her voice cracking open. Selena, I know you're seeing these messages. I need help.
Please.
Please help me.
Help me. Help me.
The same two words in different voices, different registers, different levels of desperation, but always the same two words. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I was wrong about you. Not, I miss you. Not even, how are you? Just help me. 43 separate times, from 4 different people, and 0 apologies among them. I listened to every single one, start to finish. Some of them I listened to twice, not because I was hoping the second listen would reveal something different, but because I genuinely couldn't believe what I was hearing the first time. Then I set the phone down on my desk, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling for a long time, watching the light from the window move slowly across the tiles. I called Jessica, my closest friend in Portland, the one whose name I'd written on every emergency contact form for 7 years. My family found me, I said. Silence on the line. Then, what part hurts? The part where I'm not surprised. 7 years building a life out of $200 and a suitcase. 7 years of therapy, of learning to sleep through the night, of hard, unglamorous work. And the first time my family reaches out after all of that, it isn't to say they missed me. It isn't to say they were wrong. It's to ask what I can give them. I put my phone on silent. I didn't call anyone back. I didn't block the numbers either, because blocking would have felt like a reaction, and I had finished reacting to that family years before those 43 voicemails ever landed. 6 months before all of this, actually, I'd received an email out of nowhere from my Aunt Patricia. No excuses, no long preamble, just a woman finally saying a true thing after decades of silence. She wrote that she was sorry for staying quiet all those years. Your mother has a way of making people disappear, and I didn't have the courage to be the next one she disappeared. Then she told me something that tightened my jaw so hard it ached for an hour afterward. Grandma Ruth's fund, Patricia wrote, had actually been $12,000 for each of us grandchildren, held in separate, individually named accounts. My mother had forged my signature on the withdrawal paperwork and transferred all of mine into Marianne's account. Patricia knew because she had been listed as a witness on the original documents, back when Ruth first set the accounts up, and she'd kept a copy in a shoebox in her closet for years, unsure what to do with the truth she was carrying. $12,000 wasn't life-changing money to me anymore, not at the salary I was earning. But the forgery was the architecture of my entire childhood, condensed into one clean, provable transaction. My mother hadn't just favored Marianne emotionally, the way she always had. She had stolen from me, physically on paper, with my own name written in a hand that wasn't mine. I didn't press charges. The statute of limitations had already run out by the time I learned about it, a fact I confirmed later with an attorney. But I kept everything. Every document Patricia sent, every message, every piece of proof, filed away in a folder on my laptop labeled simply Ruth, because I had learned by then that proof outlives excuses, and someday I might need it. 2 months after Patricia's email, Margaret walked into my office with an odd look on her face, the look she got right before she was about to hand me something bigger than I expected. "Pastor Daniel Bravo runs a church in a small Ohio town," she said. "He's on the board of a community development nonprofit out there. They have an annual charity gala, and they're looking for a keynote speaker this year. I recommended you. You grew up in small-town Ohio, right?" My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the edge of my desk. Margaret had no idea which town. She had no way of knowing that the committee chair listed on the event page was the same woman who had once stood in front of 200 people at a 4th of July picnic and told them her own daughter was in a rehabilitation facility, when in reality that daughter was working a double shift at a diner 2,000 miles away. "The town is Richwood," I said, my voice carefully even.
Perfect.
"You'd be perfect." I almost said no. The word sat right there on my tongue, loaded, ready. Then I thought about Grandma Ruth's letter, the one still folded inside that wooden box on my nightstand. I thought about closing that front door softly in the falling snow. I thought about 7 years of being a ghost in a story I never wrote a single word of. "I'll do it," I said. That night I looked up the event online, and there it was, in plain black text on the nonprofit's website. Selena Lawson, committee chair. I texted Patricia, my thumb hovering over send for a full minute before I finally pressed it. "Tell me about the event." "I'm the keynote speaker." Her reply came back in 30 seconds, like she'd been sitting there waiting for exactly this message for 6 years. "I know. I haven't told your mother. Get ready." I went back to Richwood on my own terms, through my own front door, for the first time in 7 years. I flew into Columbus on the 15th of March, rented a gray sedan at the airport counter, and drove 90 minutes through flat, gray Ohio farmland, the kind of landscape that looks the same in every direction until it suddenly, unmistakably, becomes home. Richwood looked smaller than I remembered, the way childhood places always do, everything exactly the same. The water tower, the diner, the church with the crooked steeple, which somehow made me feel like I had shifted into an entirely different dimension of my own life. I checked into a hotel 3 miles outside town, changed into the navy suit I'd bought specifically for this, and sat on the edge of the bed for 20 minutes just breathing, running through the speech in my head, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. The community center on Maple Street had white tablecloths, 200 folding chairs arranged in careful rows, nearly all of them full by the time I arrived. My badge, printed on cream cardstock, read, Selena Lawson, Director of Operations, Hale Associates, keynote speaker. Through the doorway, before anyone noticed me, I could see the whole room laid out like a stage set I hadn't agreed to perform in. And at the center table, in a navy dress nearly identical in color to my own suit, smiling like she owned the building, my mother, Selena Lawson, committee chair. My father sat beside her, quiet, smaller somehow than I remembered. Marianne wore an outfit that looked expensive in a way I doubted her bank account could currently justify. Carlos stood near the buffet table, scrolling his phone, unbothered, the way he'd been unbothered my entire childhood. My entire family, 6 feet away through an open doorway, without the faintest idea who was about to walk onto that stage and say their real name into a microphone. Pastor Daniel Bravo took the podium microphone at 7:15 sharp. Our keynote speaker tonight began her career from absolutely nothing and now leads operations at a firm that has impacted over 50,000 families across the Pacific Northwest. Please give a warm Richwood welcome to Selena Lawson. I stepped out from behind the curtain and walked to the podium, my heels loud against the wooden floor in the sudden silence. The spotlight hit me square in the face, and for 1 second, just one, brief and total, I was 23 years old again, standing in that same room while my mother told 15 people I was broken. Then I blinked, and the light adjusted, and I looked out at the audience, and at the center table, for faces I knew better than any others on this earth turned white in almost perfect unison. My mother's smile evaporated in real time. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, no sound coming out of it at all. She gripped the edge of the white tablecloth so hard her knuckles went bloodless. I watched her eyes dart sideways, scanning the room, calculating, and even in the middle of total shock, her very first instinct was crowd management, checking who was watching her face, not mine. My father set his water glass down so hard it splashed across the tablecloth, and his expression went completely blank, the specific blankness of a man remembering, all at once, something terrible he'd allowed to happen a long time ago and had never once corrected. Marianne's hand flew to her chest like she'd been struck. Carlos stopped chewing mid-bite, his fork frozen halfway to his plate. The audience rose to its feet. 200 people who, for 7 years, had been told I was unstable, people who had prayed for me by name from church pews on Sunday mornings, stood up out of their folding chairs and gave me a standing ovation. And my mother remained frozen in the exact center of it, the single person in that entire room still sitting down, small and stunned in a way I had genuinely never seen her look before. I let the applause settle, and I breathed, the way my therapist had taught me, for counts in, for counts out. Thank you, Pastor Bravo. And thank you, Richwood. It's been a while. A ripple of soft laughter moved through the room, a few glances exchanged between people trying to remember exactly which family I belonged to. I delivered the speech I'd prepared, 20 minutes on community development, real data, case studies from our nonprofit clients, professional and polished, the exact speech Margaret had helped me rehearse 3 separate times over video calls. Then, near the end, deliberately, I changed direction. I grew up in a small town like this one, I said. Some of you might remember me. A low murmur moved through the room. I left this town 7 years ago with $200 in a suitcase. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because staying was costing me something I couldn't afford to keep losing. I was told I was unstable. I was told I needed professional help. The truth is, the help I needed was distance. And this career started because someone in Portland looked at me and actually saw a person. Not a problem to manage. Not a story to tell at church. A person. I paused. I let the silence do its work, the way I'd learned to in 100 client meetings. Community development isn't only about grants and infrastructure and spreadsheets, I continued. It's about seeing people. Really seeing them. Not the convenient version of them. The real person standing right in front of you. I didn't name anyone. I didn't point at my mother's table. I didn't even let my eyes drift toward it. I didn't have to. The whispers began around the room like a match catching dry grass. That's Diana's daughter. The one she said was in rehab. She's a director. By the time I finished, the room stood again, longer this time, and some people were openly wiping their eyes with paper napkins. My mother did not stand. She sat perfectly still through both ovations, the napkin crushed to nothing in both fists, her face the color of raw meat left too long in the light. I stepped down off the stage, and people I hadn't seen in 7 years crowded around me, warm, stunned, genuine. We had no idea. Your grandmother would be so proud of you. We should have asked more questions back then. Honey, I'm sorry we didn't. I accepted every word of it, and some of it, honestly, healed something in me I didn't know was still open. My mother pushed through the crowd toward me with a smile screwed on so tight it looked bolted in place. 20 people watching her every move now, waiting to see what she'd do. Selena, honey. Her arms opened for a hug, an audience hug, a performance for the room. What a surprise. Why didn't you tell us you were coming? I didn't step into it. I let her arms hang there in the air for one long, uncomfortable second before she dropped them. You had my number, Mom. For 7 years. Her smile flickered under the strain in her voice. You've embarrassed this family. I didn't name anyone, I said, evenly. If people drew their own conclusions, that's not my responsibility. Marianne appeared at her shoulder, her mascara slightly smudged. We need to talk about family. I listened to all 43 messages, I said. Not one apology. Just help me. That's not a family reaching out to someone they love. That's a collection call. My father stepped closer, voice low, eyes fixed on the floor between us. Selena, let's not do this here. Dad, I said, You had 7 years not to do this. This is just the first time I've been in the room to say it back. Carlos trailed in behind them, arms crossed. You think you're better than us now?
No, I said.
I think I'm finally done being less than what you all needed me to be. I stepped back, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the exit. Calm, steady, no running, no tears streaming down my face in front of 200 witnesses. I had already done enough of that, 7 years earlier, in the snow, alone, with no one watching at all. That night, from my hotel room 3 miles outside Richwood, I opened my laptop and wrote one email, addressed to my mother, my father, Marianne, and Carlos together. I wrote it exactly once, and I did not soften a single line of it. I'm not going to co-sign any loans or send any money. I'm not angry. I'm clear. If any of you want a real relationship with me, it doesn't start with a message asking for help. It starts with an honest conversation where someone actually admits what happened. Not, we did our best. A specific apology for the fund, for the lies. For 7 years of telling this town, I was in a facility while I was actually building a career from nothing. Until that happens, I wish you well. But my answer is no. I read it twice. I didn't change a word. I pressed send, closed the laptop, and lay back on the hotel bed, listening to the quiet of Ohio through the window. No triumphant music swelled up around me. No dramatic tears. Just the calm, settled satisfaction of a woman who had finally, completely stopped negotiating with people who had never once valued the deal in the first place. A week after I got back to Portland, I called Mr. Vera, the elderly attorney Grandma Ruth had named in her original letter to me. He was retired now, 81 years old, his voice slower than I remembered, but still sharp underneath it. He remembered everything about Ruth's accounts, every detail. The statute of limitations had already run its course by the time I'd learned about the forgery. He confirmed gently. I'm sorry, Selena. The $12,000 was gone for good, with no legal path left to recover it. But I had been thinking in the weeks since about what Grandma Ruth would have actually wanted done with the truth I now had proof of. Not revenge, exactly. Something more permanent than revenge. A legacy. I contacted Portland State University's financial aid office and, working with Margaret's own foundation contacts, established an annual scholarship for students estranged from their families, specifically for the ones who checked the box marked no family contribution, not because their parents genuinely can't pay, but because their parents simply won't. I named it the Ruth Lawson Community Scholarship, and I funded the first 3 years of it myself, out of my own savings, without a second thought. The university published the announcement online with a photograph from inside Grandma Ruth's wooden box, me at 6 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, and Ruth standing behind me with her pearls catching the afternoon light through her kitchen window. It was never really about the money, not the original $12,000, and not the scholarship either. It was about rewriting the ending of a story that had never once gone my way. My grandmother died in that house surrounded by people who underestimated her every single day of her life. I put her name on something permanent, something that would outlive every single one of them, something that would go on quietly changing lives long after Richwood forgot my name again.
Let them search that.
My father's letter arrived 6 weeks after the gala, by regular mail, in an envelope addressed in his careful, slanted handwriting, the penmanship of a man who never writes letters and clearly had to think through every single word of this one before he committed it to paper. Selena, I don't know if I have the right to say this, but I'm sorry. Not for your mother. For me. For sitting in that chair at that table and saying nothing while she talked about you like you weren't in the room. For every single time I told you not to upset your mother, when what I should have done was tell her to stop. I wasn't keeping the peace all those years, like I told myself. I was keeping my own comfort. You deserved a father who chose you, even when choosing you was hard, especially when it was hard.
I didn't do that.
And I'm going to carry that for the rest of my life, whether or not you ever write back. I read it twice, slowly, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold beside me. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where I kept Ruth's original letter. I didn't respond. It was the first real apology I had ever received from a Lawson in my entire life, and it had come from the person I expected it from least, which somehow made it both more meaningful and harder to answer. 3 months after that, on a Sunday in June, I'm standing in my kitchen in Portland stirring a pot of pasta while Jessica argues with my neighbor Dave about whether hot sauce belongs anywhere near garlic bread. Margaret is on my secondhand couch with a glass of red wine, laughing at something on her phone. 2 coworkers I've become genuinely close to are setting my dining table, the one I bought at an estate sale for $40, scratched and mismatched and completely mine. 6 chairs, no 2 of them matching, arranged around a table that has never once hosted a performance. This is my Sunday dinner. No obligations. No performances for an audience. Nobody here because they have to be. Everyone here because they genuinely want to be. I look around the room and think, unexpectedly, of another table, much longer, in a house in Ohio, where I used to be invisible in plain sight. This table is smaller. The plates don't match. The wine costs $9 from the grocery store down the street. And I have never, in my entire life, felt more completely seen than I do standing at the stove, in this small kitchen, surrounded by people who chose me. My father's letter is still folded in that drawer. I haven't answered it yet. Maybe someday I will. Maybe I won't. My mother hasn't reached out since my email, not once. Neither has Marianne, though I heard through Patricia that she eventually found a way to catch up on her mortgage without my help. Carlos sent a one-word text 2 weeks ago.
Sorry.
No period at the end. No follow-up message after it. I saw it come through on my lock screen. I didn't respond. I don't know what happens next with any of them. I genuinely don't. And for the first time in my entire life, I am completely at peace with not knowing. The door isn't locked.
I want to be clear about that.
But it isn't standing wide open either. It's just there, quiet, waiting for someone on the other side to knock with something more substantial than 2 familiar words. Until then, I have pasta on the stove. I have wine in my glass. I have this scratched, mismatched secondhand table and the people sitting around it who came because they wanted to, not because blood made them. It's enough. It is genuinely completely enough. If you're still listening, I want to say something to you directly, one person to another. If you recognize any part of this, the black sheep role you never auditioned for, the messages that only arrive the moment someone needs something from you, the family that never calls on your birthday but calls the second they see a dollar sign attached to your name, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not selfish for wanting more than what they offered you. Those words, the ones they used on you, are simply the sound of people losing control of a story they never had the right to tell about you in the first place. The 2 words my family said to me 43 times over were "help me." The 2 words I actually needed to hear were "I'm sorry." Those are not the same sentence, no matter how similar they might sound in the moment, and you do not owe anyone the first one until you have genuinely received the second. Real family chooses you on purpose, again and again, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, and certainly not because your name suddenly looks useful on a loan application or a search result. The bravest thing I ever did in my entire life wasn't leaving that house in the snow at 23. It was not running back the moment they finally called, 7 years later, when all they had to offer me was 2 words that were never, not for 1 second, an apology. My name is Selena Lawson. I am 30 years old. And the most valuable thing I own isn't a job title, and it isn't a salary, and it certainly isn't a family name. It's the silence I can finally afford to keep on my own terms for as long as I choose to keep it.